Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, ranking the Timberwolves roster into tiers, which players are the most likely to be traded at any point in the next year to the least likely players to be traded. Any surprises along the way? It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to us by our friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. Hopefully you've had a fantastic week and big plans for the weekend ahead as summer winds down. I know the state fair is getting underway in Minnesota. And yeah, I mean, we're like, this is the time of the offseason. We're looking at what's the next move, right? What's next to happen? Minnesota's got a couple roster spots to fill. We talked a little earlier this week about Bones Highland probably having the inside track on one of those spots. They probably won't even fill the last one. But remember, it was last September the Wolves pulled the trigger on a massive trade, trading Karl-Anthony Towns to the Knicks for Dante DiVincenzo and Julius Randle. So I wanted to take a half step back, look at the Timberwolves roster as a whole, and put the players on the roster currently in two tiers. The tiers are the most likely players to be traded and the least likely players to be traded. And there's a lot of context along the way. Yes, it's not a trade value ranking, but what is the likelihood these guys are traded? I think we could put them in several different buckets, and I'll explain along the way what I mean by that, or what each one means really. And also why, other than it's the time of the offseason where like, hey, look, anything could happen. It's quiet, but then all of a sudden it's not, right? I'll explain why this is front of mind for me as well. So there's something there to discuss as well. First, though, a big thank you, as always, off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Genuinely appreciate you making Locked On Wolves your first listen. Of course, you can listen anywhere. You can also watch on YouTube. You can watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app as well, which you can find on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. So why am I talking about this right now? Well, The Athletic, and specifically David Aldridge, who's done a fantastic job covering the NBA for a long time, a lot of it for NBA.com, NBA TV. He's at The Athletic now, and he's releasing an offseason rankings column, ranking the offseason for every team. So he's doing it in three parts. I believe that on Friday, he's doing the last part, if I'm not mistaken. The piece I'm talking about came out Wednesday. The first article was like the 10 worst off seasons, 21 to 30. The second piece was the middle of the pack, 11 to 20. And the Timberwolves were 20 on his list. And I expected them to be in the middle pack. I thought maybe they'd be a little higher just because, like, I mean, they had three guys to retain, right? Nas, Julius, and Nikhil, and they got two of the three, which doesn't feel too bad to me. I don't know what more you wanted them to do unless you didn't like the draft pick. I'm not going to quibble with it. Who cares? It's not a big deal. Having them at 20 is defensible, at least, because it was a quiet offseason. But, running it back mostly as a conference finalist is not necessarily the worst thing. So David says in his write-up, I'm just going to read what he wrote on The Athletic. This is pretty interesting. He says, another team whose success forced it to make tough second apron calls. In Minnesota's case, it couldn't bring back all of Nas, Reid, Julius Randle, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker in free agency. So the Wolves are betting that second-year man Terrence Shannon Jr. can take up some of the slack from Nas' departure. Interesting that the Wolves drafted and traded for multiple bigs in the draft. Side note, he's including Rocco Zikarsky as one of them. Like, nobody thinks Zikarsky's playing the next couple of years. Okay, back to Aldridge. Rudy Gobert is still pretty good most nights. Ask the Lakers about Game 5 of their series with Minnie. Of course, that being the 2020 game. But he's starting to slow some at 33 years old, and he's expensive. And, well, they got multiple bigs out of the draft. Do what you will with that information. Okay. So what's the implication here? The implication is clearly, hey, we've heard Rudy may be available, or the Wolves may have been open to trading Rudy, right? Like I'm reading between these lines. I think that's clear what Aldridge is going for. And of course, we do know, at least it was reported reliably by reliable sources. It was out there that the Timberwolves were, I believe this is even a Brian Windhorst thing, that Rudy Gobert was included in the trade package for Kevin Durant if the Wolves had gotten Durant from the Suns. And basically, if Durant had said he would sign an extension in Minnesota, it sounds like that trade was pretty close to happening. And I talked at the time about how Rudy Gobert is the ultimate floor raiser. Like, dude's not on bad teams. He's been on a couple non-playoff teams. I think once, take out his rookie year when he wasn't a rotation player. Once has Rudy Gobert been on a team that wasn't a top 10 defense. Like, there's a reason the Wolves, quote unquote, overpaid to acquire Rudy Gobert. It's a team that couldn't make the playoffs. They needed to make, and I guess it was coming off the play-in, the Patrick Beverly season. But ultimately, like, they needed a floor raiser, and Rudy was that. They went 8 seed, 3 seed conference finals, 6 seed to conference finals. Like, 3 pretty good years with Rudy so far. And all that to say, like, the Suns would have been open to that deal, right? Because they were a bad defensive team. They still want to remain relevant. They still have Devin Booker. Like, ideally they're retooling on the fly. That's what you're trying to do if you're Phoenix. So they were open to acquiring Rudy Gobert. The implication here from David Aldridge is that the Wolves are preparing for the post-Rudy years. And we know what's Rudy's contract, right? He's got 2 years and a player option. That's what he's got left. I mean, that's it. I know he signed the extension, but remember, that was to lower the average annual value of the contract to allow the Wolves to do some other stuff and stay underneath the second apron. So Rudy gets $35 million this year. He gets $36.5 next year. And then it's a player option for $38 in year 3. Now, he's going to be 36 going into his age 36 season. So I don't think he's going to turn down $38 million. But so you could look at it as 3 years, sure. But that's kind of it. Like, it's unlikely. And at that point, you're not building your team. Like, he's not probably your 3 years from now. I don't think you're talking about Rudy as a heavy minutes guy starter like he is currently. So the implication here from Aldridge is that the Wolves would be open to trading Gobert, that they're starting to prepare for life beyond Rudy Gobert. We talked about this a couple weeks ago on the show, that Jean Beringer is like a different kind of big. He's a big 7-foot+ Frenchman who's an awesome shot blocker, but he's a very different type of rim protector and player overall than Rudy Gobert. And if that's the way the route the Wolves are going, and you look at some of the other guys that the front office has acquired, the Leonard Millers, obviously different, but that type of overall physical profile, where's this going for the Wolves? Are they going to look to play overall technically smaller, but longer 1 through 5, right? It's not positionless basketball exactly, but are you looking for as much length and athleticism as you can find? And it doesn't necessarily, you might not have a 7'2", like traditional type center like Rudy Gobert, but you might have a 7'2" athletic switchable freak like Beringer, and you might have a, Ant essentially playing point guard, right? So, like, clearly the Wolves are preparing for a life post Rudy Gobert. And that's where this whole conversation comes in with how soon do they trade him? And I was thinking about it. I was like, I'm not about to make the case they're going to trade him this year, because they're not going to. So I'm not going to say that. If you're tuned in to hear me say that, I'm not going to say that. Spoiler. But I do have some tiers. I'm going to tell you what the tiers are, and then we're going to get into it. I'm going to do them in, I guess, order from most likely to be traded, or sorry, the other way around, from least likely to be traded to most likely to be traded. I have a not getting traded category. I would have it would take a really compelling offer, like they're not trying to trade these guys. If somebody blew them away, it'd be on the table. Probably need to come up with more concise names for these tiers, categories. I have a category of probably if the Wolves have a horrible year and they're stuck midseason or below 500, or God forbid a bad injury to a really good player on the team, these guys could get traded if something bad happens. And then I have an only for a specific offer category, one guy there. And then I have an other category, which I'll probably hit right here off the top with the not getting traded one, because you might as well get it out of the way first and leave some of the I guess more climactic moments toward the end of the show. So that's what we'll do here on the show today. We'll get into my tiers here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize, hey, I want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It is the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer that you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Gametime is the official ticketing partner, by the way, of Locked On MLB. Makes it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. Of course, the Twins have been in town this week. Not going great. I get it. You know, any MLB game. If you don't want to go to Twins game, find another MLB game. There's plenty of other MLB teams that live within a certain hour drive. I'm not going to tell you to not go to a Twins game specifically, but whatever. Locked On MLB, Gametime is the official ticketing partner. You can find the baseball game you want to go to instead of endlessly scrolling to try and find the best deal. Gametime zone deals will help you pick the best seats in the section that you want just for you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. For $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. Without further ado, let's get into these tiers. I'm going to give you my other tier first because these guys aren't going to appear in any actual tiers, and I'll tell you why. Get him off the table. Joe Ingles, like no one's trading for Joe Ingles. The Wolves don't want to trade Joe Ingles. He's on a minimum contract. I know it's over $3 million, but it's based on how long he's been in the league. Like always, a chance he gets added if they need to add a body to a trade, but like no one's trying to trade for him. The Wolves aren't trying to trade him. There's no value to Joe Ingles as a trade piece. He's in the other category. And I kind of sort of put Leonard Miller in that category for different reasons. I think Leonard Miller has trade value, but I also think he's worth just as much to the Wolves at $2.2 million this year as we've invested a couple years into this guy. I guess we'll find out if they pick up his option here in the fall for the following year. I'm sorry. I guess they've changed the way that's done now for those rookie deals. Or he wasn't a first round pick. So his option, okay, I'm confusing my first and second round picks. His option's actually not due until next summer for the following year. So he's on the team this year with a guaranteed $2.2 million salary. And I just maybe a team would come along and say, hey, we'd give you a second round pick for Leonard Miller, and the Wolves would consider it. But I think Leonard Miller still has more talent, and also a couple of years now for the Wolves staff invested in him. Then, if someone offered a first-round pick, yeah, you do it. No one's doing that, right? So you're not going to move him for a second rounder. You're not going to move him for an end-of-the-bench guy. There's still upside there. But I don't think he's going anywhere. Maybe he's a throw-in for a bigger trade, somebody we talk about later, but I don't think there's a specific trade market for him or anything. The Wolves aren't motivated to trade basically the cheapest guy on their roster this side of Jalen Clark and their two ways, right? All right. So let's start then at the other end of things, kind of, sort of. Guys that are not getting traded. I'm just going to list 6 guys. These guys are not going anywhere, probably for the life of their contracts, or at least for the foreseeable future. Like, call it 2+ years, which I guess are maybe slightly different things for a couple of these guys, but we'll call it 2, at least in the next 2 years. Anthony Edwards, not getting traded. Jaden McDaniels, not getting traded. I know those are breaking news items. Jean Beringer, they just drafted him. He's not going anywhere. Just is not happening. Terrence Shannon Jr., I don't think he's going anywhere. Right now, I think teams would obviously be interested based on the flashes he showed last year. I think everybody agrees he was a clear lottery talent that slid for the off-the-court stuff that he ended up being found in a court of law as not guilty for, and he clearly is a lottery talent. There's a lot to like about Terrence Shannon Jr. The Wolves would not be motivated to trade him. He is, yes, on a first-round draft picks contract, but that means he's still pretty affordable toward the end of the first round. So only $2.6 million this year, $2.8 million next year, and then a team option for $5 million 3 years from now, which is not expensive. Not expensive. He's not going anywhere. Jalen Clark, not going anywhere because he is the lowest paid player on the Timberwolves, and he's really good. Remember, they signed him to that 2-year extension. He has he was promoted to the roster, got another year on top of this year. So $2.1 million, almost 2.2 next year. And for what he is, pound for pound, absolutely one of the better defenders, perimeter defenders in the league. And, shot 40% plus from 3 last year. Whether or not that's sustainable, I don't know. But a bargain. Like, there's no reason to trade Jalen Clark. They are not going to trade Jalen Clark. He's exactly what they need, which is a viable rotation player on a bare bones minimum contract. That is what Jalen Clark is. My sixth guy in this category is Mike Conley, simply because he's not going to get traded. $10.7 million is his deal. He probably retires after this year. There's just no one's trying to trade for Mike Conley, and there's no reason to try and trade him. So he's not going anywhere. Those are six guys that are staying put: Ant, Jaden McDaniels, Jean Beringer, Mike Conley, Terrence Shannon Jr., and Jalen Clark. Now it gets a little more interesting. I've got 5 guys left on the roster. I'm not including two-way guys. 5 guys left on the roster. 2 guys, it would take something to trade for these guys. And by that, I mean, it would take an intriguing offer where a team would have to come knocking and be like, all right, we really like this guy. We're going to overpay for him, essentially. 2 guys, Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo. We'll start with Dante. Dante DiVincenzo was rumored to be in some versions of that Suns trade for Kevin Durant that ultimately obviously did not end up happening, because Dante's on one of the best bargain deals in the league. And this was something that we talked about a ton last fall. It was talked about nationally a little bit, talked about a lot in the Wolves blogosphere, podcast sphere, podsphere, podosphere, I don't know, whatever. Because Dante at the time, it was like 3 years and like 34 million or 35 million, whatever. Now he's still only, it's a little under 12 million this year, 12.5 million next year. And for some reason, we talked about this, I think just on Wednesday's show, it's easy to forget how good Dante was this year. I think because Minnesota Timberwolves fans' expectations were perhaps higher than they should have been for a guy that averaged 15.5 a game with the Knicks, shot 40% from 3. Guess what? He shot nearly as good from 3 this year. He was within 0.6 percentage points of what he shot in New York. The volume was just down because he played less minutes. He didn't start like he did most of the season with the Knicks. Very valuable player. And at $12 million a year, that is a bargain for Dante DiVincenzo in his age 29 season. Dante is not going anywhere unless a team says, hey, look, we have Kevin Durant to offer you, right? Like that was the conversation that it took. This isn't the same as the Ringer and Bill Simmons do the trade value rankings. That's not what this is. But Dante, I think, was honorable mention or whatever on that list. I think he's probably higher than that given the value of the contract. He's probably not a viable full-time starter on a finals team. He was on a second round team with the Knicks last year, and he was a 7th man on a conference finals team for the Wolves, and he played a big part on that Golden State team a couple of years ago, right? So I don't know that you could get he's not worth 20 million, but he's probably worth more than 12. And 12 million is an absolute bargain for Dante DiVincenzo, and it's only 2 years left on the deal, this year, next year. If they wanted to trade him, every team in the league would line up. And that's the other thing with Dante is he fits every team. He can play multiple roles. He's a solid on-ball defender. He's a great catch-and-shoot guy. He can score a little more off the dribble if you need him to. He has a ton of trade value. The Wolves are not trading him. Now, if somebody said, hey, look, we'll give you this other rotation guard on a slightly cheaper salary and give you a first-round pick, yeah, you probably do that. If you can get Kevin Durant, you do it. But the Wolves are not looking to trade Dante DiVincenzo. It's a little bit different than Jalen Clark, a lot different than Jalen Clark. It's the same sentiment, though. You need viable rotation players on very affordable contracts, good value to fill out your roster when you're paying Anthony Edwards, $46 million and Rudy 35 and Julius Randle over 30. You need value contracts. And that's what Dante DiVincenzo is. The other one in this category is Naz Reid. When Naz signed the contract, my reaction was it's an absolute steal for the next year, maybe 2 years. It might be a little overpay long-term. He's never played starter minutes, and you might be asking him to in a couple years if Julius Randle's gone, which we'll get to Julius. And I guess if he plays starter minutes and plays well enough, then yeah, in 2 years, 28 million or 25 million, I guess it is not a bad number for Naz Reid. So the question is there still upside for Naz? And if there is, and there might be, he's only 26. If he keeps getting better, then it becomes an absolute bargain. At the moment, I think if a team came calling and said, hey, look, I mean, with Naz, there's also all the other stuff, right? The cult hero status and all that. So I really don't think he gets traded. I think it's really unlikely. But if a team absolutely wanted to overpay for Naz Reid, and I know he took less money to stay in Minnesota, even though he's coming off the bench, there's a very clear path to him starting within the next couple of seasons, if not sooner. I think the Wolves would consider it if somebody blew them away. There was a chance he wasn't going to come back in the offseason, right? I think it would at least be on the table. But the contract is a good value. The Wolves are not shopping Naz Reid at all. and it would take a lot to pry him away from the Timberwolves, no doubt. So I put both Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo in my, it would really take something for the Wolves to trade these guys, but it doesn't mean it absolutely could never happen. I've got two more categories, 3 more players, process of elimination, guys I haven't talked about. We're going to do that here next to close out the show. All right, let's close the show with 2 more categories. I'm going to do the only for a specific offer one first because I feel like the other one's a little more exciting. The only for a specific offer is Rob Dillingham. And what I mean by that is the Wolves, we talked about this, I don't know, last week maybe, when I talked about there was the Anthony Black thing on blank, maybe it was Eric Pincus. Somebody suggested the Wolves consider trading Rob Dillingham for Anthony Black in a multi-team deal. And I said, look, the Wolves need other creators from the backcourt. They don't need another long defender who isn't a consistent, efficient scorer or a distributor. And Anthony Black is not clearly either of those things. He could develop into a better shooter. He could develop into a better passer, but he's not now. So why would you trade one project for another one when the project you have is Rob Dillingham and the upside is exactly where you need it as a scorer, as a shooter? You've got defenders. You've got Jade McDaniels. You've got Jean Berger. You've got Jalen Clark. You've got, guys that can ant, right? You need more guys that can score from the backcourt to put pressure on a defense and alleviate some of the pressure on Anthony Edwards. And that's Rob Dillingham. That said, if somebody came along and said, man, we love Rob Dillingham, we would have drafted him higher than 8 2 years or, a year ago. And therefore we'll give you, I didn't scour all 29 other rosters and look at exactly who these guys could be. Maybe that's the next step here, but like a more fully realized high usage guard that's also affordable. It really would take a unicorn. I mean, like Dillingham has a pretty big salary because he was a top 10 pick, $6.5 million this year. So he's actually the 7th highest paid Timberwolf. Am I doing that right? 7th highest? 8th highest paid Timberwolf on the roster this year. And next year, his player option is almost 6.9. And 2 years from now, it's 8.7 million. 5% of the cap, like the projected cap 2 years from now. All that to say, there are some moves that could make some sense. If somebody says, hey, look, we'll give you a first and this useful high usage guard or useful scoring guard, or, another young, exciting guard that could replace Mike Conley. The idea behind the Anthony Black idea isn't horrible in terms of getting a closer to primetime, still young Mike Conley successor from the backcourt. But the archetype of player that is Anthony Black makes no sense. They need a higher usage, somewhat efficient scoring guard and or somebody who could facilitate. You're not going to trade him to replace him with a guy that doesn't do those things well. So that doesn't make sense. Is there a unicorn out there that the Wolves could trade for? And if they also threw in a pick and this team was going to overpay, yeah, you could do it. But I think trading Rob Dillingham 1 year into the I don't want to call it an experiment, but the experience, call it the Rob Dillingham experience, if you will, that seems counterintuitive because you still don't know the answer. You didn't draft him to be Mike Conley's replacement last year. You drafted him to be Mike Conley's replacement next year, not even this year. Yeah, you want to see progress. You want to see Rob Dillingham be able to be the backup point guard and eat into the Conley minutes, keep Conley fresh, hopefully for later in the season in the playoffs, and perhaps even take the job over. That would be great. But the Wolves didn't draft him thinking that 19, 20-year-old Rob Dillingham was going to be the starter last year. So you don't, would have been nice to see a little more from him in year 1. Yeah. But you're not just going to be like, all right, pull the chute. Let's get out of the business. Let's find somebody else. Cause you're just resetting it. And you're 1 year closer to when Mike Conley is going to be gone. So that wouldn't make any sense. I think it would take a very specific offer for Minnesota to truly consider trading Rob Dillingham. Is it out there? Maybe. Is it possibly? Yes. Is it likely? No. I don't think Rob Dillingham is traded this year. My last category, there's 2 players. Process of elimination. There's 2 prominent guys I haven't talked about. The only way these guys are traded this season is if things go off the rails. Below 500 on Jan 1. I hate even saying this, but a devastating injury, an injury to Ant, something significant where that's leading to the team having a poor start, or say they get off to an okay start and then somebody gets hurt. It's clear And it's probably not going to be a great finish to the season. That's the only way I see either Julius Randle or Rudy Gobert being traded this season. Call it through the trade deadline next year. I'm not quite saying I'm not going to go 12 months because I bet, okay, let me say it this way. It would take something dramatic for either Julius Randle or Rudy Gobert to be traded at some point before next year's draft. I truly believe that. Season off the rails. That's what it would take. However, I also would say that I think one of Julius Randle or Rudy Gobert is likely to be traded at some point in the next, call it year and a half. Call it trade deadline 2027. So a little more than a year and a half, I guess. What is that? It's about a year and a half. I think one of the two of them is likely to be traded in the next year and a half. And almost for sure in the next 2 years. Go a full 2 years, finals draft 2027. I think it's likely that one of those guys is traded by that point. They both have player options for the 27-28 season. Randle at $35.8 million and Rudy Gobert at $38 million. Both contracts are actually pretty tradable. I don't know that the Wolves could turn around and trade Julius Randle right now for something that is worthwhile. I bet they could trade Rudy. I bet Rudy Gobert has a slightly higher trade value. He's only slightly more expensive, and he has a proven track record as a floor raiser. Julius Randle does not. Julius Randle needs to be in the right situation or be somebody that, could a bad team come to the Wolves in the next year and say, hey, look, we just want to sell some tickets. We want a dude that's a former All-Star that played for the Knicks that, can come in and score 20 plus a game. The Wolves could do that. I'm sure somebody would do that. And at this point, it could be anybody, right? Any bad team that might just say, all right, feels like something the Kings or Wizards would do, right? And I'm not saying they're actually going to, so they're not. But if somebody did that in the next year or two, that, yeah, you trade Julius Randle, you consider it. But the Wolves decided, look, he's worth what he's worth because we need another creator, because we don't have a fully realized Rob Dillingham. We don't have this other backcourt creator, and we also don't have another power forward at all, other than Reid, right? And then you still need to backfill that role, and it's a whole thing. So you keep, it's the devil versus the devil you don't. And also there were some good Julius Randle moments, and clearly he likes playing for Chris Finch, and there's some upside there. I don't literally mean him getting that much better as a player. He's 31, but to the sinking of Julius Randle with Rudy Gobert and Anthony Edwards and the Timberwolves as a whole. So same thing with Rudy. I think they both could be traded. It's teams would want to trade for either of them. If the Wolves said, look, Gobert is on the market, Randle's on the market, teams would come calling, and they could trade those guys. I'm very confident in that based on their salaries and what they both could do. But I don't think the Wolves are going to trade either of them. I do not think they're on the market actively. I do think they considered trading Rudy Gobert in the Kevin Durant deal. That seems obvious. And they probably considered not bringing back Julius Randle. But at the end of the day, this was the safest thing to do. And it keeps something I've talked about so much this offseason, maximum flexibility for Tim Conley moving forward. Nobody's under contract. Nobody has guaranteed money beyond next season. So this is 25-26, beyond 26-27. Only 3 guys: Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Reid. Gobert and Randle have player options 2 years from now. Those guys are both tradable. Teams would trade for them. In 2 years, it becomes dicier when they're 35 and 33, respectively. But at some point in the next 2 years, one of them is probably traded. I just don't think it's this year. So if you're going through and ranking this Wolves roster for trades, really, I don't think any of these guys are likely to be traded this year. Really similar to last year. I said all last season, there's no trade deadline deals for Minnesota. They're not trading value contracts like DiVincenzo. They're not obviously trading their best players. And there's not a whole lot of value in some of these other guys. So, is there a chance that midseason the Wolves say, all right, we've given up on Dillingham? Yeah, it's possible, which is why I left him in the, if it takes a specific offer. If somebody says, hey, look, we'll give you a pick for Leonard Miller and the Wolves can go sign somebody off the buyout market, yeah, you might do that. But I don't think there's a whole lot that's tradable that makes sense for the Wolves to trade this season. But it's a fascinating thing to keep an eye on, throughout the year. And as Tim Conley keeps to kind of churning this roster in a good way, I don't mean that in a bad way. There's a lot of value there and a lot of good contracts that I'm sure other teams would love to have on their books. All right. That's all I got for you today. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, we'll be back on Monday. You can listen anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can watch on YouTube. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Reminder, for your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA podcast. Our guys Doug, Matt, and Hayes do an awesome job keeping you up to date throughout the offseason. You can find Locked On NBA wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Of course, just like Locked On Wolves, it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, Locked On Network is also your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast. We'll catch you next time.